Liza Lawrence here with episode 20, God is Aware. Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, a wife, mother, teacher, and miracle lover. If you're new to this podcast, this is what we do here. Each week on Miracle Monday, we celebrate awe-inspiring true stories from regular people like you and me. People who have experienced something surprising and wonderful that could be considered the work of a divine source. My desire is to help us recognize God's hand and His love in our lives, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen. Thanks for listening to the show. Now let's celebrate wonders and miracles together. Isaiah 41, verse 13. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee. In today's episode, we're going to hear 3 different stories. The first is a story of a rollover car accident where miraculously all 7 passengers walked away. You'll also hear of a girl's willingness to serve the Lord. That brings about a beautiful friendship and lifelong relationship. And lastly, a woman's empowering experience with a divine voice that saved her from a possible attack. But first, I wanted to wish everyone a happy new year. We're starting 2019. I love the new year. It's always a fun time to make new goals. Do you remember your goal from last year? I don't think I do. We often make these goals and then we forget. Actually, I have been keeping a gratitude journal all year, so that's been really powerful for me. I've been doing a lot of personal growth this year, which of course, starting my podcast this year, that was part of my journey of personal growth, yet I didn't know it at the beginning of the year. I had this idea back in April, but I just knew I wanted to grow this year. So this podcast is a result of my own personal journey, which is kind of fun. You never know what the year's going to bring. So I'm excited for this new year. I hope you guys have some goals in mind. I also wanted to give a shout out to one of our sponsors, Meditations on the Mount. Maybe this is the year to start meditating, to really pursue your spiritual relationships with the Lord and spiritual growth. And one way to help with that is to meditate. This is something I've been doing for years. I love it. Meditations on the Mount are Bible-based guided meditations that help you in your meditation practice. Meditations on the Mount also offers a meditation course that you can take if you're not sure how to meditate or why it's important or how it fits into Christianity. There's a link on meditationsonthemount.com that you can click on to check out that course. Thanks for joining me this week on Wonders and Miracles. Now let's get started. I have Sam with me from Idaho, and she is going to share a miracle story that happened actually the year I was born in 1977. So this was a car accident miracle. So I'm excited to hear this story. And Sam, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I graduated from high school in 1977, and that was in June. And first part of July, I think we were going to head to Raymond, Alberta, Canada for my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. So we took off driving. There were 7 of us in a station wagon, my mother and my sister, and then a half-sister, and a brother-in-law, and then a baby.
All family members, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay.
And we took off pretty early in the morning, and we were headed toward the Challis, Idaho area. We went that route. And my brother-in-law had been driving the car, and I was in the front seat sleeping. And then I heard my mother in the back seat said, I'll go ahead and switch you places. And so we stopped the car, and we got back on the road, and my mom was driving. I was in the front seat with my sister, and I did not have a seatbelt on. Don't know why. It was in the 70s. There was a lot of things that were not mandatory back then, I guess.
Yeah, and we had a station wagon too, and I don't think we had seatbelts in the back seat even.
No, we called that the way back, and I don't think there really were seatbelts. So we proceeded to go back on the road, and then I heard a really unusual noise when the car tire rolls over those graded areas on the
Uh-huh.
left or right hand side of the road. And I opened my eyes, and we were way on the other side of the road, and I thought, oh, my mom will just get us right back up on the road.
Hmm.
Well, she overcorrected, and she punched the gas instead of the brake and flipped us. And we
Wow.
rolled 2.5 times to the other side of the road. In my mind, when I remember, and obviously when it happened, it's all like in slow motion. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very unusual feeling. I do remember smells, and I remember there was smoke and debris and just a dirty, nasty smell. And so I remember my mother having to roll the window up to get out because we were on the hood.
Oh,
She
wow.
got out and she was screaming, Scott, my brother-in-law, get the baby, get the baby, get the baby. And so I had been pushed to the center of the car, which is why I was grateful I didn't have my seatbelt on, because I would have been squished. The roof and the seats were literally 3 or 4 inches when we saw the car flip back over.
Hmm.
And so I got out of the car, and I could see that my hand was cut pretty bad. It had rolled out the window. I remember feeling really confused because it was pretty intense. My mother was screaming to get the baby, and she had picked up my 5-week-old niece off the road. The car rolled 2.5 times and ended up on its hood. And if it would have rolled again, according to my mother, it would have rolled on the baby.
Oh, wow.
So our scenario is God helped us. He literally took the baby out of the car seat in the back of the car because 3 people ended up in that seat, and we think she might not have survived. So the baby was in the road. My mother picked up the baby, gave it to Scott and Rayanne, the parents, and said to Scott, please give the baby a blessing. She was screaming a lot. I remember thinking,
Hmm.
somebody's got to calm her down because it's making everybody else feel panicked.
Mm-hmm.
And we just kind of emerged out of the car.
Hmm.
I remember things strewn all over the freeway. There had been nobody pass us for quite some time. I remember thinking, it's pretty early in the morning. We're the only ones on the road, which is nice. And then all of a sudden, after it happened, it was like miracle people showed up. There were people with RVs who started sweeping up the glass. There were other people who picked up my sister and my brother and the baby and literally whisked them away to Chalice, Idaho, where we were going to all eventually end up in that hospital there. I remember there were people who were helping me pick up my hot rollers that were all over the road. It's amazing how God puts people in your path when you need them, how the only people on the highway for who knows how long I was resting. And then all these people with cell phones were not even invented. So we had people with walkie-talkies, or
Wow.
what are they even called when you breaker 19, those ham
Like
radios?
ham radios. Uh-huh.
Yes, that's what it was, that actually called us an ambulance. So
Wow.
it was just really a really unbelievable situation that we literally all walked away from this horrific station wagon that was a mess. The ambulance came and took the rest of us to Chalice. And I remember thinking, is this normal to drive away from a car that is literally demolished? And how in the world are we going to get to Canada?
Uh-huh.
It was just one of those really crazy situations. My mother she had some broken ribs, and the steering wheel had really bruised up her chest. But she had some deja vu moments and kept screaming, this has happened before, this has happened before, why has this happened before? So there was that scenario. And then my half-sister was wandering all over the place, so she was in shock. Somebody had grabbed a diaper from a box of diapers that had been strewn everywhere and put it around my hand to stop the bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was probably, I would say, a half an hour before we all got into an ambulance and were driven to Chalice, Idaho, and very small hospital. And they looked at us and said,
Oh.
we can't even deal with you. So they put us in another ambulance. We were then driven to Idaho Falls, where we ended up staying with Scott, my brother-in-law's grandparents. They put us all in rooms and took care of us the best that they could after we were all in the hospital and checked out. And nobody had any broken bones. I should take that back. The baby, she had a broken arm and a hairline fracture of her skull. So she was very blessed. Nobody else had any broken bones. It's interesting to look back on a situation like that and realize that we weren't supposed to go to the grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, but we also weren't supposed to go to heaven yet. So we all survived. Probably about 2 or 3 weeks later, I remember I was in Ontario, Oregon, which is where my mother lived at the time. So we eventually all got back to Oregon, and they towed the station wagon back to her home. And obviously it was in the upright position. And that's when we realized what a miracle it was that we literally all walked away from this accident, and that if we would have had on seatbelts, we might not have lived, because the shuffling of people and sliding over to the center, and one person got tossed in the back, so the baby was safely put in a place till she could be picked up and transported. It's really an amazing story to tell people, and they're always really surprised that 7 of us literally walked away from it. The baby obviously didn't walk away from it. She was a baby. But just seeing the station wagon and the state that it was in, and people would drive by the house and say, "Who died in this horrible accident?" And then they were always shocked when they were told, nobody. 7 people literally walked away from this accident. And it's literally a miracle that I am able to talk about it and share it, because you never know.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you pray before you left or anything for protection, or do you just feel like you were being watched over anyway?
That is a good question. We always prayed before we went anywhere, and it's continued into my family and my children as well. It's something that we have always done, and I do believe that that prayer was definitely answered. We were very much protected.
Mm-hmm. And how interesting that the placement of everyone, with the baby being out of the car. That is amazing that that there was heavenly help watching
Absolutely.
over. And I always love stories where people show up. It's like this divine, you be here at this time right now. And did your mom ever talk about when she said this has happened before? She was probably in shock, but did she have a deja vu?
I remember talking about that. I do remember her saying, I had witnessed part of this accident in my mind. I don't think she saw the whole thing, but maybe she was forewarned. I don't know.
Yeah, some type of
It's very interesting to know. Sometimes you never know the reason why things happen, but it was just incredible. Such a miracle.
Yeah, that is a miracle, that such minimal damage and such a bad accident. That's amazing. That really is.
It really was.
Anything else you learned from this?
I do. I forgot to tell you at the beginning. I did have a girlfriend that I invited to come with me, and she ended up not being able to come because she had to work. And then I invited my boyfriend, and he ended up having to work. And looking back, I'm really, really grateful that I was not in a position where I would feel responsible for a dear friend and having them be in part of such a horrific accident. So I'm grateful that it was family that you didn't really have to explain or apologize for. So I'm grateful for those tender mercies as well, because I think it was meant to be that they couldn't come.
Yeah. And who knows, with that dynamic, maybe it would have turned out differently or something else. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for what you do. It's a beautiful program. I think it can help many people. Appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. It's been fun. It's amazing to hear everyone's stories and how often we see the hand of God in our lives. It's everywhere. He's everywhere, I should say.
It sure is.
So
it sure is. And when you recognize that, then you see it even more and more. And I love that.
Yep. I love that too. So thank you very much,
Wonderful.
Sam.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so my next guest is Katie, and you've heard her. She shared a story before in December, and after that first recording, she thought of another story that she felt really prompted and impressed to share. So Katie, thanks for sharing this next story with us. And I haven't heard this story, so I'm excited to hear it. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you for having me on. This story started 15 years ago, actually. It's kind of been a long journey. So 15 years ago, my mom was expecting another baby, and I use a wheelchair. I have spina bifida, so I can't walk. Anyway, when she was expecting this other baby, she's like, oh, I really think we should have like home health care come in and help you a little bit while I'm recovering from having another baby. So the first day we had this home health care aide come in. Her name was Carly. She was super sweet, fun. She had just barely gotten married. When she came in, I thought, oh, she'll just come in, do her job, and then I'll never see her again, you know? But she was the regular one that would come every day. And after a year or so, we just stayed really, really, really close. And a couple years later, they moved to Virginia. And I stayed really close to her and texted and called. So she and I have just had a very close relationship for a very long time. Fast forward, like 13 years later, I decided to serve an LDS mission. And because I'm in a wheelchair, they have you do service missions that are closer to home. You just go for the day. When they have you do this, they give you a list of places in your community that will take service missionaries. At least that's what they did for me. So there was one in particular that I really had my heart set on doing, and it was the LDS Family Services.
And what do they do?
At the time, they would help a lot with adoptions, people who had drug problems or depression, anxiety. It's a lot of counseling.
Okay.
Anyway, but for some reason, I was very like, this is where I need to be. So I went in and met with them, and they were great, wonderful. I'm like, this is awesome. This is going to be great. They called me, and they're like, okay, we would love to have you. And then a couple days later, they called me back and said, our missionaries that we have serving currently right now are going to extend, so we don't need any other missionaries. So I was really bummed.
I'll bet.
I was like, this is where I feel like I need to be. Why is this not working out? My amazing mother one day said to me, just be patient. It will work out how it's supposed to. And I was so frustrated. I was like, no, this is where I'm supposed to be. Also, at the time, I had met with the LDS employment office because they were right next to each other. And they were both taking missionaries.
And what do they do there?
They help people find employment, do resumes, practice job interviewing, just all sorts of stuff to help people become employed.
Okay.
So I walked into the employment office, not ready to like be interviewed or anything for the mission there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to the director, and she was super nice and very friendly. It was funny because when I got in there, I noticed that it was a whole bunch of older people, like 65 and above.
Okay.
And I was like, this is not for me. These are all old people.
And you're a 20-something, right?
Yeah, I was 25 at the time.
Uh-huh.
No, this is definitely not where I'm supposed to be. So I go home. A few days later, when I got the call from LDS Family Services that they wouldn't be needing me, I was like, well, now what do I do? Because I had my heart so set on that one place.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, Heavenly Father, why do you want me to serve this mission when you're not even giving me the open door to do it?
Uh-huh.
Like,
making it difficult. It's hard.
Yeah, like it was so hard. And it went on for weeks. Nothing was coming available. I had tried everywhere in town that accepted missionaries. Nothing was happening. And I was getting so upset. And I was at the point where I'm like, fine, I'm just not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not working. I'm not going to do it. So I was in my room one afternoon, and all of a sudden I got this feeling, you need to call the director of LDS Employment Services, and you need to call her now. And I was like, no, that's not where I want to go. So no. And a couple minutes later, you need to call the director, and you need to call her right now. And this feeling just kept bugging me all afternoon. So finally, I think at like 4:45, I called the director. I said, do you have room for more missionaries? And she goes, oh yeah, of course. We always have room for more missionaries. We would love to have you. And I was like, okay, I think this is where I'm supposed to be. And she goes, okay, we'll submit all the paperwork and get it official, and you can start here in a couple weeks. And I got off the phone and I was like, what did I just do? I just signed up to be with a whole bunch of old people. This is not what I wanted. So I started a couple weeks later, and it was really hard for me in the beginning. And 6 months into it, I was like, what am I doing here? What is my purpose here? I wasn't connecting with anyone. Just didn't feel like it was where I was supposed to be or what I was supposed to be doing. So one day I came home and I was really upset. I was like, this is not working. And my mom said, you need to give it one more week. If in one more week things do not change, you can quit. I was like, fine, I'll give it one more week, but that's it.
Your mom sounds very wise, Katie. She gives lots of good advice.
She was at the time giving good advice, yes.
Well, and it's interesting. I've heard a lot of missionaries talk about that transition where they do struggle and they wonder, what am I doing here? I don't feel like I'm making a difference. I don't feel like I'm connecting or really being who I'm supposed to be. I've heard that from actually a lot of people who have done missions and missionary work.
Yes, and I had heard that too from lots of people, but being in that position was so hard for me.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So this next week, I went in to the office. My attitude had not really changed. Like, I was still frustrated, still thinking I wasn't connecting. And about lunchtime, this couple came in to the office to just observe what everyone does in there. And it was really funny. They walked in the door and I recognized them. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is Carly's in-laws. And Carly was the aide that I had had. And I was like, I recognize you from pictures on like Facebook. So I went up to him and I was like, are you Nick's parents, Carly's in-laws? And they're like, yes, we are. We know all about who you are.
Cute.
And I was like, really? And they're like, oh yeah, we've watched you basically grow up with Carly. And it was really funny. They gave me hugs as soon as we met each other. I helped them figure out what they do in the office. It was funny. By the end of the day, I was like, this is why I'm supposed to be here. And we just became super, super, super close. And throughout the mission, they probably helped me become more independent than anyone else did serving that mission.
Cool.
And it was just a really amazing experience. I started connecting with people. I started doing other things in the office, not just answering the phone. I actually even started teaching classes.
Wow, good for you.
They have different classes that teach resume building and interviewing skills. And when I first got there, they asked me if I would teach, and I said no. But after being there for a while and getting to know this couple, coming out of my shell a little bit more and getting to connect with people, they asked me again. They're like, will you teach classes? And they said that it would be with this particular couple. And I said, sure. So I started teaching classes, and it was really good for me. Like, it really got me out of my comfort zone. And I don't know, we just created a really good relationship. And the last day of the mission, I thought, now our relationship is going to be done. I'm never going to see you. And I was really sad about it. But honestly, since the mission has ended, I've come even closer to them.
Neat.
So I'm just very grateful for them. And I feel like they've been in my life at times when I really needed them. They're always right there.
That's awesome. I think that's neat that those human connections that touch our hearts are really strong spiritual connections. And I think relationships like that are beautiful and of God. You mentioned that they've helped you become more independent on your mission. I thought of this quote that I love. It says, a comfort zone is a beautiful place to be, but nothing grows there. When we are just stuck in our comfort zone and we don't like doing hard things, it's kind of nice, but we really don't grow the way we need to.
No, they really did help me grow and become more independent. And it's been a huge blessing in my life. Like, I did more on that mission than I ever thought I could do.
That's awesome. That is really awesome.
They've been very instrumental in my life as to who I am today and why.
Well, and I think the Lord places people in our lives that He knows will do that for us, will push us in a loving way, that will offer us encouragement and strength to help us on our journey grow into the person we are supposed to be. It's interesting that you had a connection with them. You didn't know them personally, but you knew someone. And that was the instant kind of change of heart for you of, oh, I can stay here now. I can be here, because of those relationships are just so beautifully orchestrated. I think the Lord does have a hand in all of that.
Oh, certainly. There's no way I would have met them on the mission, I don't think, had I not known their daughter-in-law years before.
Right. Yeah.
I just was amazed, and still every day I'm amazed.
That's a neat story. Thank you for sharing that, Katie. I love that.
You're welcome. I just felt like I needed to share that.
Well, good. Someone will need it.
Okay, well, thank you for letting me do that one.
Yep. All right, so I'm here with my mother-in-law, Joanne, and she's going to tell a miracle story that happened last year at her husband's graveside.
Thanks, Liza. I really appreciate this opportunity. I've always just held this really close. This happened on September 13th, 2017. It was mine and John's 49th anniversary. And I love to go back home to West Yellowstone. I truly did leave my heart in West Yellowstone because John's up there now. That's where he was laid to rest. It's a beautiful cemetery. It's about 12 miles out of town. It's just gorgeous. And Liza's been there many times, and she can tell you.
It really is a beautiful, sacred place. It's up in the mountains, beautiful wildflowers and trees. It really is a very special cemetery, and I think one of the most beautifully natural places on the planet. So I agree. It is beautiful.
Yeah, John and I like to refer to it as God's garden. Anyway, sometimes I just get in these moods where I just need to go up to West Yellowstone and talk to John. And this was one of those days, not only commemorating our 49 years, but it was also because the previous 2 to 3 months had been kind of dark for me. I don't really know what brought it on. Some important decisions were coming into my life that I felt like I had to make a decision right then. And that's always stressful. And I felt like I just had to have some kind of help because I was in a dark place. I was kind of a pity party is what it was, I think. I was feeling sorry for myself, basically, when you break it down. And I don't really know why, because I am so blessed. But nonetheless, I decided that I needed just to go up to West Yellowstone and have a good heart-to-heart with John, which I did. Now, there are some family members who have said to me, Mom, why do you do that? Why do you keep going up there? And my answer is, and always will be, I go up there because it's comforting, it's peaceful, it's quiet. I can just seem to get my head straight. And no, he doesn't answer back. It's not like I have a conversation with him. It's about, I guess, me just being able to vent and to just lay it all out on the line to him. And I do. And I also relate the fact that when John was laid to rest on February 2nd, the grave was dedicated and that ground was set aside for comfort and solace of myself and my children. And I believe that firmly, and it truly is a place of peace. And I just felt like I needed to go up and talk to him. And when I did, I have to kind of give another preemptive story. When I travel, which is a fair amount, 99% of the time, I'm alone, which is scary. I do have some of my friends are like, you're nuts. You go alone. That's scary. What they don't know is this. When I go down to get in my car to get ready to go, I sit in my car in the garage in the peace and the quiet, and I have a word of prayer directly to my Father in heaven. Pray for his guidance. Pray for his spirit to be with me. I want to be able to have a clear mind and make good decisions. And so I do. I say a prayer, and it's never failed me yet. That day, I remember specifically, I said, please give me protection that I can go on this journey and do the things that I need to do. I don't know if that prayer was put to the test or I was. I think probably a little bit of both. But I drove out of town toward the cemetery, and it's about a good hour and 15-minute drive from home here to West Yellowstone. And so it was a beautiful day. I was enjoying every minute of it, listening to my music. And I get out there, and as I made the right turn into the cemetery, I noticed in that parking lot just one lone white pickup at the very far end of it, and it was parked parallel to the road, which seemed odd to me to begin with. And I looked, there was no one in it, but I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Oh, well. So I just drove on down the lane and went to John's grave. So I get up there, and I always have a box with my roses that I bought and 2 gallons of water that I have in containers and all of my little tools that I have when I go out to the cemetery. I was aware of my surroundings because I'm lone out there to the cemetery, and so I kind of make a quick peruse the area and see who's here and who's not. And I was alone, so I get my box out, take it over, set it down by the headstone, and I begin my work. And just as I was getting in position, kneeling down on my good knee, I looked up, and there was a person coming down off of the hill, but at a rather fast pace, not running, but walking very fast. And I noticed them, and I thought, well, where did they come from? And so I just kind of kept going in the position to go. And all of a sudden, a voice came to me, and it said, stand up. And I was kind of taken back, like, stand up? Are you, what? And it came again to me, stand up. Very firm. It was a man's voice. I don't know if it was John. I don't know if it was Jesus Christ or God speaking to me directly. I have no idea. It was a man's voice, and it was very firm. And I just stood up, and I looked at this person that came down. And by this time, he'd really picked up his pace considerably. And I didn't get a voice this time. I think I was more impressed, and it said, get your phone. And so I reached in my back pocket, and I got my phone, and I went, hello? Oh, Sheila. Oh, yes, I'm here already. I got all this stuff here. I'm so excited to see all of you. Where are you at? Oh, so you'll be here in like 5 minutes? Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so excited to see you guys. Oh, that's great. Yep, Scott's on his way. Shane's coming. In fact, they should be here any minute. And Sheldon and Liza are on their way. They're just over in town, so they're already here. Oh, I'm so excited to see all of you. And I just talked and talked and talked to nobody. But the minute I started talking, he abruptly turned right, and he went over into another gravesite. And he didn't look at the gravesite that he was at. He just stared out south. And my heart was beating so fast. And so I just sat there, and I said, okay, we'll see you in a minute. And then it was just incredible because he turned to me, and by that time he was maybe 10 feet, and he just looked at me. He had the meanest eyes. I don't think I'll ever forget it as long as I live. His eyebrows were like pursed together. You know, he was mad at me, and why he was mad at me, I have no idea, but he was mad. He was evil. He had no good in that being. And so I sat there, and I started to talk once again. And when I did, it almost like it's agitated to him. And I thought, get to the car. And like I said, it wasn't a voice. It just came to me, get to the car. And so I did. And I acted like I had another phone call. And yeah, we're all here. I'm so excited to see everybody. Hurry up and get here, all of you. And I really made a big deal saying their names and stressing all that. So that really got him irritated and mad. I opened the door of my car. I'll never forget. I got in and I locked it, and I just sat there, and I just shook and prayed. I didn't cry, but I just was, thank you. Thank you for getting me in the car. Thank you for helping me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I was just overcome with joy to be in the car. I felt safe in the car. But I pulled the mirror down and looked around to see, and I couldn't see him. He literally vanished or ran or did whatever. I sat there for probably a good 30 minutes trying to decide. I was looking over at my rose bouquet sitting there on the ground with all my stuff and thinking, do I dare do this? And I just said another little prayer and said, please help me be safe. I need to go finish. I gathered my courage and put my faith in God. I went over and I put the roses in, and that was it. But I'll tell you what, that whole thing was an answer to many prayers trying to get me through that dark period that I was having. I really and truly believe that it was God's answer to my prayers of protection, because I don't usually use the word protection that much. And so I truly feel and know with all my heart that that was my miracle that day. It's just really a reminder of our Heavenly Father watches over us. He did me that day.
Yeah, that's an amazing story of protection and a miracle of reaffirming to you that the Lord is aware of you and He's watching over you. But did you feel from that experience any lift? You said you were in a dark place and that you were feeling hopeless and having a hard time. Did this experience teach you anything or help lift you out of that?
Yes, it did. I'm glad you asked that question, because it really did. I really feel that it made a change. I think it kind of like empowered me, Liza, especially when I started to break it down into pieces and I thought, he was evil. And so I was just counting my blessings, saying, I'm so glad I'm out of that situation. And it made me realize I am blessed and I don't have one thing to feel bad about.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that miracle story. That is a pretty remarkable story, and amazing that you were guided and knew exactly how to handle that situation. I think that's cool that you felt empowered. That's neat.
Thank you, Liza. I really do appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
All right, well, that's our show for today. 3 pretty amazing stories that we saw that God was aware of each one of those people and their situations and circumstances. I just love that. And I hope you all have a happy new year and a fabulous 2019. Make it a great year. Think about starting meditations or a gratitude journal or something that will lift your spirits for this year. Isaiah 41, verse 13. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee. I hope you consider sharing your miracle stories. I really can't wait to hear how God has shown up in your life. If you'd like to be on the show, please submit the story on wondersandmiracles.com. And as always, remember to notice and celebrate the miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.